Here's a chapter-by-chapter summary of Monster by Walter Dean Myers, with themes highlighted for each chapter. Chapter 1, Introduction and Trial begins. We meet Steve Harmon, a 16-year-old on trial for murder. The story is told through Steve's screenplay format, with courtroom scenes and flashbacks. He's accused of being the lookout in a robbery that led to a murder. Steve struggles with his identity and what others think of him. Themes: identity, perception, fear. Steve grapples with being seen as a monster. Hashtag who am I? Hashtag courtroom drama. Hashtag trial begins. Hashtag fear and judgment. Chapter 2, The prosecution. The prosecution presents its case, painting Steve and his co-defendants, including James King, as violent criminals. Witnesses are brought forward, describing the robbery. Steve is overwhelmed, feeling disconnected from the dangerous person they describe. Themes: guilt by association, racial prejudice. Steve's fear grows as he feels powerless to change the narrative. Hashtag guilty or innocent. Hashtag courtroom pressure. Hashtag who to believe. Hashtag powerless. Chapter 3, Steve's flashbacks. Through flashbacks, we learn more about Steve's life before the trial, his family, school, and aspirations as a filmmaker. We see his love for making films and his struggle with the environment he grew up in, caught between ambition and the streets. Themes: dreams versus reality, environment. Steve's passion for film is contrasted with the harsh realities he faces. Hashtag flashback to life. Hashtag dreams of film. Hashtag reality check. Hashtag caught in the middle. Chapter 4, The testimonies. Witnesses, including Osvaldo Cruz and Bobo Evans, testify against Steve, saying he was involved in the robbery. Steve feels more and more alienated. He questions if his own community sees him as a criminal, regardless of his innocence. Themes: betrayal, truth versus lies. Steve's world turns upside down as people he knows betray him. Hashtag who can you trust? Hashtag testimonies. Hashtag truth versus lies. Hashtag trial testimonies. Chapter 5, Steve's defense. Steve's lawyer, Kathy O'Brien, tries to humanize him in front of the jury, presenting him as a scared kid, not a criminal. She fights hard to separate Steve from the others accused. Meanwhile, Steve struggles with his own sense of guilt and the role he may have played. Themes: self-perception, innocence versus guilt. Steve wrestles with his internal guilt and the lawyer's portrayal of him. Hashtag innocent or not. Hashtag defense mode. Hashtag guilt and out. Hashtag self-perception. Chapter 6, The verdict approaches. As the trial nears its end, tension rises. Steve reflects on his life, his family, and the impact of the trial on his future. He starts questioning his own actions, whether or not he deserves to be free. The looming verdict brings uncertainty. Themes: consequences, reflection, fear of judgment. Steve is consumed with what the verdict will mean for his life. Hashtag verdict looms. Hashtag life on the line. Hashtag reflect and fear. Hashtag future uncertain. Chapter 7, The verdict. The jury returns with a verdict. Steve is acquitted of the charges, while others, like James King, are convicted. Despite being found innocent, Steve feels conflicted. His lawyer's reaction, an apparent relief, but coldness, leaves him questioning if he's truly seen as innocent. Themes: justice, redemption, identity. Even with the verdict, Steve is left grappling with his identity. Hashtag not guilty. Hashtag but am I innocent. Hashtag justice and identity. Hashtag life after trial. Chapter 8, After the trial. Steve's life after the trial is filled with uncertainty. He tries to reconnect with his family, but the trial has left a lasting impact on how he views himself. He continues making films as a way to understand and reflect on his experience, hoping to redefine his narrative. Themes: rebuilding, redemption, moving forward. Steve's journey to reclaim his identity is just beginning. Hashtag moving forward. Hashtag life after trial. Hashtag redemption journey. Hashtag rebuild my story. This summary captures the key events and themes from Monster, formatted to be quick, engaging, and perfect for TikTok. Let me know if you'd like to expand or adjust any sections.